Hi, everybody. Today's Friday, April 17th, 2026, and our dear friend Larry Johnson and Carl Wilkerson are back with us. Welcome
So,
back.
sorry about that. I got to get the dog.
Yeah, good one.
Rottweiler is on edge.
Yeah. Let me start with the breaking news. And here is what the Iranian foreign minister just moments ago said on his X account. And in line with the ceasefire in Lebanon, the passage of all commercial vessels, again, all commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz is declared completely open for the remaining period of ceasefire on the coordinated route as already announced by Ports and Maritime Organization of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And then later on, we had this tweet from Donald Trump. It says that the United States will get all new nuclear dust created by our great B 2 bombers. No money will exchange hands in any way, shape, or form. The deal is in no way subject to Lebanon either, but the United States will separately work with Lebanon and deal with the Hezbollah situation in an appropriate manner. Israel will not bomb in Lebanon any longer. They are prohibited from doing by the United States. Enough is enough. Yeah, let's what is happening. Let me start, Colonel, with you. What is happening in your opinion?
I don't know. I really don't. Seriously, I think what we've got is as what we've had all along, actually since the 28th of February, but even before that, is a completely confusing propaganda campaign that Donald Trump sits at the center of. Whether he writes those personally or not is anybody's guess. I doubt it very seriously, but there's some script they're operating from. And one of the purposes of this propaganda campaign is, I think, intentionally to keep everything confused. And let's just examine that particular one for a case in point. There's no way Israel's going to stop in Lebanon. No way whatsoever. They had a huge argument last night in Israel. They had a huge argument over what they were going to do, and it had no person in there arguing for complying with what was just announced. So Israel has no intent to stop bombing Lebanon. They have no intent to withdraw. Aoun is furious with the fact that they are essentially announcing they're staying in the south, and I suspect they'll probably stay north of the Litani River as well. So what are we talking about here other than just pronouncements for the sake of pronouncements and ancillarily to make Donald Trump look as if he's crafting an exit from this incredible mess he's got himself into? And he's not. And the biggest reason is ultimately going to be the same biggest reason he got in the first place, Bibi Netanyahu.
Yeah. Larry, jump in. Your take.
Let's bring back Ozzy Osbourne. Let's cue up Crazy Train. You know, the chorus was mental wounds not healing, life's a bitter shame. I'm going off the rails on a crazy train. Donald Trump has gone off the goddamn rails. I mean, this man is now completely detached from reality. I was initially hopeful yesterday when I heard, because, you know, the 10-point plan that Iran said, look, if you want to have a negotiation to end this war, here are our 10 points. These are not up for negotiation. These are what you must do. And one of those was, you know, the ceasefire between Lebanon, Hezbollah, and Israel. And so, you know, that was still a sticking point. Well, it looks like they got that settled yesterday, finally. You know, as Colonel Wilkerson said, Israel is pissed off about this. And, you know, they're trying to stay they still have not been able to take that one Ben Javel, the one village. They've been fighting, trying to get control of it, and they've been unable to get control of it. And so I thought, oh, good news. And then then I looked at what Scott Bessent was doing, imposing sanctions, doubling down on sanctions on Iran and on China. And one of the key points in that 10-point plan was lift all sanctions. And so at the very time that the White House is announcing that they are forcing Israel to agree to stop shooting, to try to have this ceasefire in Lebanon, the White House is then doubling down on sanctions and making it clear that this is not only to go after Iran, this is going after China. There's this kid on YouTube, Sean Fu, who's does financial analysis, and he was like, "What the hell is the United States doing? This has now enraged the Chinese to the point that they recognize that the United States is not under the control of a normal human being. That they recognize nothing that the United States says makes you can rely on. You got to watch it. What they're doing, and what they're doing is trying to sanction China now, in addition to sanctioning Iran, where Iran has said very clearly, we're not going to negotiate an end to this war until you lift all the sanctions. Ergo, there's not going to be any more negotiations. I'd be surprised if they come off.
And I just add, Nima, that these are sanctions on China on top of sanctions we already have on China.
Yeah.
One reason Xi Jinping said what he said, they are going to take over the world financial system. And I have no doubt that they will. It'll take time, but it'll happen.
Carl, what was mentioned in Iranian message that it is related to what has happened between Lebanon and Israel, the ceasefire. We know that the ceasefire between Iran and the United States has happened. One of the main conditions was the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. But the precondition was the ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel, which wasn't provided at that particular moment a week ago, or almost 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And then you see, as soon as we have the ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel, at least what they have declared so far, we know that Israel is going to get back to 2024 type of ceasefire that we've seen before, as you've just mentioned. But Iran right now can get back and close the Strait of Hormuz because the situation between Lebanon and Israel is tied to what's going on with the Strait of Hormuz. They did that before opening up this Strait of Hormuz. How do you see that?
Well, I think it would close right again if the ceasefire doesn't hold, or it's very obvious that Israel is violating it. I really don't expect, I might be wrong, Hezbollah to violate it in a flagrant way, but I certainly expect Israel to. Israel doesn't know what the word ceasefire means. So I would expect Iran to reimpose some sort of strictures on the Strait of Hormuz. I'm not sure that they have actually relaxed everything that Trump and his team seem to be insinuating that they've relaxed. I think you still got to pay a pretty hefty fee to go through the Strait, for example. Right. But I don't think this is an end to the hostilities, as it were, at all. I think it's just a lull that Donald Trump has maybe achieved purposefully so he can think. If he does that. He's in a pickle here. He's in a complete pickle. I mean, you can really see some sweat, I think, on Donald Trump's brow now when he comes out. He is significantly worried. And I don't know whether he's worried because he's afraid of what might be used against him in the files. And that, I think, is increasingly my view of what's put him in Netanyahu's camp so vigorously, or just the consequences of this conflict, which I'm not sure he has the brain power to assess. So who's doing that for him other than perhaps Kane? Certainly not Hegseth, who is, as Larry said, too busy stealing Quentin Tarantino's movie words to pray.
Oh, my God.
Worse than Ted Cruz. You know, I go to Genesis for my national security decision-making advice. Well, where do you go in Genesis? Well, I don't know exactly, but I go there.
Yeah, that was unbelievable. I'm a big fan of Tarantino, and particularly Pulp Fiction. And it's like, if I was Princeton, I would immediately withdraw Hegseth's degree because he's an embarrassment. To claim his as a Princeton grad, just said, man, we produce morons.
I think Tarantino, this may be a rumor, I think Tarantino came out and said he withdraws his right to exist in the human race.
Yeah. Yeah. No, look, this, that we're reacting to what Donald Trump, his truth, so-called truth, but what Arachi, the foreign minister, said as far as opening the Strait of Hormuz. Now, again, this is a playback against the United States, who's now imposed this blockade. And, as Colonel Wilkerson remembers from his younger days in Vietnam, we had to destroy the village in order to save it. So now we've got a corollary. We got to blockade the strait in order to open it. You're going, what? What is the theory behind all of this? Because the full weight of the consequences of the cutoff of supplies, the supply chain coming out of the Strait of Hormuz. We're now at day, 49. Mm-hmm. We are now full. It's been a full 7 weeks, getting ready to start the 8th week. And what most people don't understand is those oil tankers that were full, that left the Strait of Hormuz, left the Persian Gulf on or around February 27, 28, before the IRGC shut it down. Those tankers still took a while to get to the various ports. And my understanding is yesterday marked finally like the last day that one of those tankers finally reached its destination. So we've been talking all along as if 20% of the world oil was cut off on February 28th. Well, that really wasn't true. The oil was still, it was out there on the ocean on these tankers. Now, today, it is cut off. The world is now, as of today, dealing with a definite 20% shortage of oil. And the disconnect between the futures market and what people are actually paying in Singapore, and 2 days ago, when the tanker showed up, the price per barrel of oil was not the $95 that they're showing for Brent on the futures market. No, $210 a barrel. Okay, so you've got this incredible gap. This economic punch in the gut is, let's say that the United States and Iran, said peace in our time. Never mind, it's all over. Everything's open. It's going to be at least 3 months before the shortage that's out there is going to be corrected. At least 3 months, if not longer. So the world has not yet fully grasped the depth of the economic decline that we're in. And then you add on top of that this decision by Bessent. It's mindless to double down on sanctions on Iran, to threaten the banks and to threaten China, and to think that the Chinese are just going to sit back and go, oh, those crazy Americans, there they go again. No. This is accelerated China. China's basically said, fuck it, man. We're going to set up our own system. Screw those Americans. I think they're that angry.
And Besson is an idiot. I mean, there's no question about it. I don't know if he made this decision on his own or he got direction from Trump. I'm told when he meets with Besson, it's one-on-one. He doesn't have any kind of Security Council meeting. He just meets on him one-on-one. Either he comes to the White House or Trump gets him somewhere else. But it's an idiotic decision. And to Larry's point, we haven't seen anything yet, really, in terms of what the global crisis might be before this is over with, especially if Iran hits that second tier of targets that include things like Ras Tanura and other critical assets. And they hit it with the same kind of devastation and accuracy they hit the first round of targets. Larry maybe can speak to this better, but I'm hearing from the intelligence community, those few that will still talk to me, that there's high suspicion in the White House and in the Pentagon that China has made available to Iran now one of the best satellites in the world, rivals anything we have for the kinds of things we gave to Ukraine, for example, so they could hit Russia's nuclear facilities, their nuclear response capability. Remember that? We now have China giving Iran, I'm told, pretty much carte blanche on this satellite in terms of time and use. So that means that second tier is going to be even more devastating than the first tier, if that wasn't in operation for the first tier too. I don't know. But it is an incredible move by China in many respects, if it's accurate, and I suspect it is, because China is saying now, so much and we're doing it in your face. And if you keep coming, we'll do more. And by God, we got a pack of it ready for you.
Yeah. Larry, we had a report on this account related to Mossad on X, reported in the last 48 hours, 4 cargo planes, Chinese cargo planes, landed in Iran. And to the point that the Colonel was making just moments ago about Iran is just receiving tolls from, they're charging tolls because it was confirmed by the member of the parliament in Iran. He tweeted just moments ago that Iran is charging tolls for those tankers that are passing through the Strait of Hormuz. And the other point is, just moments ago came out again, the Strait of Hormuz is under the full sovereignty of Iran, and ships are only allowed to pass through the corridor designed by the IRGC Navy and with prior Iranian permission. Here is the latest, Larry. You're to the point that the Colonel was making about China and the level of cooperation between Iran and China, which was asked to by the media. It was one of the main topics in the mainstream media. They were asking Donald Trump as well. Your understanding of that?
Well, let me make a comment about what I've heard from a friend who's acquainted with the intelligence, and he commented. He said, "Look, the Chinese drone technology for air defense is approaching skunk." He said, and this is a quote: "skunk works shit that I've never heard of before." Now, you probably, Nima, you don't know what I mean by skunk works, do you?
No.
Okay.
Lockheed.
He's a Lockheed Martin. The CIA in the early day, back in the 50s, they set up a top secret, behind the curtain research facility. It was called the Skunk Works, and it was headed up by a guy named Clarence Johnson. No relation, but he was known as Kelly Johnson. They produced the SR-71 Blackbird. They produced the U-2 spy plane, and they produced the Glomar Explorer, among other things. So, I mean, it was this cutting-edge technology. And I'll just say, as an aside, when I joined the career trainee program in September of 1985, the second week of our briefings about the CIA, Kelly Johnson came to our class and spoke. So I got to meet the man. So what this is saying is that there is some advanced technology that the United States is not familiar with that the Chinese have introduced into Iran on the air defense side. This drone, what they're talking about, the drone technology, these drones that can loiter in the air looking for a target. And then when they find the target, which is a fourth generation fighter or an F-35, they go after it and shoot it down. So if we decide to get back into the fight, we're going to suffer more losses at a level that we have not yet experienced. So this is the danger here, though, is what's happening with Donald Trump. Yes. He has changed. I interviewed Robert Barnes earlier this week. It's not up yet on Countercurrents. It's still getting edited. But he's in touch with people inside the White House, and there's a general consensus that Trump, starting last fall, September, has undergone. He's got a change in personality that is He's yelling and screaming at people. I listened. Marjorie Taylor Greene was on Piers Morgan in the last couple of days, and she described. She said Trump they called her up and was screaming at her. She said literally yelling because she was going to sign. She would not pull back on this discharge petition to bring out to expose the Epstein files. And she said to Mr. President, you're the one that said that you were going to expose all of this. I'm just doing what you promised to do. And he was yelling at her, calling her names. So then he attacked her on his Truth Social, and she started getting death threats. And she said, I got death threats against my child. And she said, I reported it to the FBI, to Kash Patel. I reported it to Susie Wiles, the chief of staff. And she said, and I talked to the president. And what Donald Trump said to her was basically, not my fucking problem. And if your kid dies, that'll teach you. Something to that effect. That's not normal. There is not a shred of empathy in this man left. He must be removed from office as soon as possible. He is no longer intellectually intact. And it is, and I'm not saying that for dramatic effect. I mean, that is the reality. That's where we're at. And yet, here he is, man, finger close to the button, and he's making the most erratic decisions, swinging from one end to the other. Yeah, we gotta get the Strait of Hormuz open, so that's why we're gonna blockade it. What? And he says, yeah, the CNN poll has me at 100% support, and then 3 sentences later, and CNN is fake news. The guy literally is not able to connect one thought to another.
I've thought the same thing for a long time watching him, especially since about mid-January or so. And I have friends in Atlanta who confirm what he was just saying about the description of the telephone call with Marjorie Taylor Greene. A couple of them are, I won't say friends of hers, but they are inside the circle in which she speaks and talks politically in Georgia. And the other thing I'd say, Larry remembers this too, that Skunk Works was most famous in my time of knowing about it in a significant way for the F-117 stealth fighter.
Yeah.
And wow, if these drones have any kind of 3rd or 4th or 5th generation stealth on them, I mean, that would be amazing. And the remarks the guy made to you sort of made me think about that. What if they have a drone that is essentially stealthy? Even the F-35 can't detect it. That would be a revolutionary change in drone technology. And it's not something I don't think, having been associated with the F-117 for a while, I don't think it's something that's totally out of China's capacity to do. Now, originally, they stole most of that from us, or we gave it to them. In fact, I knew a couple of people who were almost indicted at Lockheed Martin because they let too much out of the bag, if you will, in an attempt to make money. Mm-hmm. And in fact, Larry probably knows this too, the Chinese first stealth fighter version looked a lot like the F-117 chapter and verse. Yeah. But if they've done that, if they've taken stealth a generation or two down the road with drones, that would be, I think, game changing.
You know what? The other thing that has happened is this drone, they call it MQ-4C, that was hit by Iranians. And it's, when it comes to the cost of this drone, it's unbelievable. I have never thought that there could have been a drone more costly than F-35. The cost of this drone is more than 2 times F-35.
Yeah.
What was that, Larry? What is your understanding of?
Man, I presume Lockheed Martin got that contract as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was great for the shareholders initially. I don't know if it has been shot down or if it has been brought down. There's a difference. Yeah. If Iran was able to, somehow hack it and then bring it down and get control of it. You know, they did the same with that drone that became the model for the Shahed. that was originally a CIA
The Beast
design.
of Kandahar, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
The Beast of Kandahar. Yeah.
So, yeah, what I saw, it's called they call it the Triton. That this Triton cost $250 million. You're going, what?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a Lamborghini is a great, it's an amazing car, but you can't really drive it on the streets. I mean, I'm going to the grocery store.
I saw one the other day. You can if you're really risky.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Also saw a Aston Martin that I think must have been at least maybe 300 million, 400 million. God, it was an incredible Aston Martin.
Or the Bugatti. That's
one too.
Yeah, that's that costs about as much as a Triton.
Mm.
Yeah, no, this is.
And then I've had this discussion with my son on occasion when he'll talk. He's been in drones for 15 years now, and my grandson is now in drones. And I've had it a lot with people in the Pentagon whom I knew before. Most of them are dead now. But why do we build these super expensive things like Predator and Reaper and this one when we know that if we ever get in a real conflict, they'll be the first things shot out of the air?
Yeah.
And the answer is simple. We don't get into real conflicts. We go after third world, the old term, third world countries, and they don't have the capability to do it. Well, in Somalia, they showed us a little bit different than that, and several other places too, but not very often. So we let them rape us, them being Lockheed Martin and Grumman and others that do this sort of thing. And they probably have proprietary maintenance contracts on them too. So, and the other thing we have now, Nima, which I think I told you about, is we have contracts with Charles de Gaulle Airport, with Heathrow, with airports all over the world now where we can land and take off our drones. Only some of them have a subcontract that goes along with having munitions on that civil airport and being able to load and unload munitions. But some of them do. I'm told about a third of them. And you can probably guess who they would be. But we now have the capability to fly these drones out of 100 or more civil airports in the world. So they're virtually global. They don't have to worry about, footprint or where they get their fuel or whatever. That is an incredible achievement in many respects for the drone operators, but they're these kinds of drones. So you put all that money into that infrastructure and you go to war with China or Russia or some other power that has a sophisticated capability to take you on, you're going to lose all of that very fast because it's not hard to shoot down.
Yeah.
And
as the Houthis showed.
Yeah. What did they get? 7 Reapers? Seven or 8 Reapers?
7, one a week.
Yeah.
One a week. Yeah. At that, and when you count up, those were $35 million dollars a piece. So think of this: 7 Reapers equal 1 Triton in terms of dollars.
Amazing the money we're wasting.
Larry, when it comes to the drones, even that Lucas version of the Shahed 135, 136, it's called 135, 136. I don't remember exactly the number, but they copied the Shahed version, but it's not as effective as Shahed version, Iranian version, and they haven't shown any sort of upper hand in this war. Are they gonna? Do you think that the United States is learning something with the case of drone operation, with the case of and how the nature of the world has changed? The war has changed, and the United States is fighting the war the way that they were fighting during the Second World War. Well, and they want to defeat Iran. That's not the case anymore.
Well, first of all, let me just say for the record, I'm reluctant to answer your questions because you're not wearing the appropriate shirt today, but I will make an exception. Okay. Look, the United States is 2 generations behind Russia and Iran and China when it comes to drones. Our procurement system is too slow, too bulky, and the part of what's holding it back is some of the essential parts that are needed to build these drones come out of China, and we're doing everything in our power to piss off the Chinese. I mean, it would be tough if you went to Hollywood and pitched this as a script about how self-destructive the United States is. They'd say, "Oh, come on, that's not believable." It reminds me of a story. I was friends with a guy who he was a script writer in Hollywood, and he's the one that wrote for Clint Eastwood the line, "Go ahead, make my day." Okay, and so he went in and he pitched a story about, hey, it would be like Die Hard, except it's Die Hard with aliens. They kidnap a guy, put him in a spaceship, and then he fights his way out, and he's pitching this to this guy in Hollywood. The guy goes, "Sorry, I don't get it. That's just not believable." And the guy's name is Joe Stinson, and Joe goes, "Well, what are you working on?" "Oh, we got this great story. It's about an earthquake in Los Angeles and how the world, and it was just." He goes, "Okay, right." But what I'm saying here is the system is structured in such a way that it does not readily accept innovation. It doesn't accept out-of-the-box thinking. It's very much controlled by a combination of lobbyists and then congressional interests. Who's going to get paid? Who's going to benefit from this? It's not part of a national strategy. It'd be one thing if Department of Defense was sitting around and saying, "Okay, we need to have this kind of capability to do this thing, and then therefore let's get it done." That's how the Skunk Works actually functioned. No, we're in something where they get pitched ideas from the military-industrial complex, and then the Pentagon will go with them, and gee, lo and behold, sometimes it involves people making decisions who are also lining up a sinecure, get their next job. They approve this project, and lo and behold, they're on the board of that corporation, getting paid. So, that there is that disconnect from reality. We've gone for the high-priced, muscular drones. So it's like sumo wrestlers. The big and bulky and fat, and these nobody on the U.S. side had really saw the potential of these small drones, what they could do, and how they would be employed in combat. And again, you get a sense of the difference of how far behind the United States is when you watch like the Chinese celebrate Chinese New Year, and they got this incredible, instead of fireworks, they got these drones that are creating three-dimensional images, very complex images. It looks like works of art in the sky from drones. And, it's not just one kid sitting down there with a joystick. Meanwhile, in the United States, we can't do that. We do not have that ability yet, and haven't made it a priority. And that's why I say with this, the reality of current warfare is it is drone warfare, and the United States isn't even armed and equipped with it to do it in any fashion other than build a $250 million drone that gets shot down. And I guess there are 11 more of them in the world, but that's it.
And Nima, one of the things Hegseth did that I have to applaud in concept, but not that he's going to be the one implementing the concept, is T2COM for the Army. That was supposed to take care of this in terms of the Army. And the Army is really looking hard at making drones a major component of its forces now. So maybe that will change things. I don't have a lot of hope for it with Hegseth being there, because he doesn't even understand what he's done. But if he fired the first general in charge of it, just fired him. New guy in there now whom I don't know. But if it's done right, then at least the Army is on the right track. But can it get away from the contractors, as Larry just pointed out? That's who's really dictating what people want in the military, is the contractors who give them what they want. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Carl, we know that Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth specifically, they're talking with car manufacturers to, to produce munitions because they're short of ammunition. One of the main reasons of putting an end or somehow going after a ceasefire with Iran because they're short of cruise missiles, they're short of interceptors. They want to shift it to car manufacturers to force them into producing these munitions. How do you see that?
Well, they're going back to World War II and what we did with the dollar men, if you will, and the people who were leading American industry at that time. We adapted all kinds of production lines to other things. You couldn't play golf unless you already had a golf club because the golf club production lines were turned into other production lines for armaments. And the same thing happened across the wheel vehicle industry, too. A lot of people don't realize that there hardly were any vehicles made for the civilian population during that time. I think what we're looking at, though, is we're looking at a day late and a dollar short, and particularly the latter, because look at what's happening right now. You even had a Republican congressman get up in Rogers's House Armed Services Committee and say, what the hell are we doing? This is more money than we spent in any year of World War II. What are we doing? This is far too much money. You think maybe $2 trillion now, roughly that's what they're asking for. And if you put the national security budget together, not just the Defense Department budget, it's $2.75 trillion. That's as much as anything else. It's more than anything else in the federal discretionary budget. And it is equaling now the interest payments on the debt and surpassing that even. So what's left? And that's what this Republican was saying. This is going to build, I think, into probably a rejection, ultimately, maybe not of this coming NDAA, but ultimately the one that comes down the road after it, because Trump's not going to relent. They're going to pack this as much as they can. And why did they put that huge pay raise in there? I think it's the biggest pay raise that the military's ever gotten. They put it in there because they're trying to buy the military. That's what they're trying to do. All of these things have nefarious purposes attached to them. And the nefarious purposes are not good for the country in any way, fashion, or form, aside from the fact that we're broke and we're spending too much money. This Republican congressman actually used that phrase. We're broke, damn it.
Yeah, I mean, Trump's not in office, a year and 4 months, 3 months, and he's added $2 trillion to the debt.
Yep.
$2 trillion. And that amount's going to accelerate, not decelerate.
And he's done it in areas that are not very productive in and of themselves, if productive at all. It's not education dollars. It's not health dollars. It's not the kind of dollars that multiply greatly through the society. It's dollars that at best have a one-for-one exchange. And that one on the other side of the exchange is the person working for the contractor.
Yeah, Larry, Donald Trump came in with this sort of motto that he's going to bring everything back to the United States. He's going to produce more. He's going to go after China. He's going to produce more, even electric vehicles, and even, somehow compete with China. You see right now he's forcing the car manufacturers to produce munition instead of, competing with China. Because it's all about the policies, the strategy of the United States is all about offensive. It's not anything defensive. When you go on offensive, you don't have that much of advantage when it comes. For example, the war against Iran is showing that. You go on offensive, you have the fragility of your positions, as we've seen with the U.S. bases in the GCC countries. And with the China would be the same, with Russia the same. Don't you think that's the time for the United States to get back to the United States, to the borders of the United States, and understand how would be the future if they want to focus on the U.S. economy?
Hey, logistics. It's all about logistics. The Chinese understood from the outset that if we're going to become an industrial power, we're going to need to lock down the supply chains so that if we want to produce something, we will have the raw materials necessary to produce it. And that's what Donald Trump doesn't understand and is ignoring, that I agree with the concept that yes, the United States should reindustrialize. We should be in a position where we're not a financialized economy, but we're an economy where people build and produce things. And I've said before on another podcast that I compare and contrast what life was like in the United States when I graduated from high school in 1973, and I look at my classmates, my friends. My father was a maintenance foreman at Armco Steel, so he was involved in the production of steel. One of my other friends, his father was a foreman at Standard Oil. So there was an oil refinery in Sugar Creek, Missouri. Another worked at Alice Chalmers, which manufactured farming equipment. Another's father was a foreman on the line at General Motors. We had a couple of automobile plants in the area, and so there were very, 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 very few. In fact, I don't even recall. I don't recall any of my friends having a father who was like a lawyer or an insurance agent or selling or a financial, anybody doing finance. We built things. You go back when I went back for my 50th high school reunion or 40th, all of a sudden, at the 50th, all of those are gone. Those are gone. There's no steel plant. There's no automobile plant. There's no farm equipment plant. And so what do kids graduating from high school have a chance to look forward to doing? Hey, would you like to supersize that burger order? So it is the kinds of jobs that actually develop skill and show that the United States can produce stuff, that's gone. And you don't recapture that. And one of the problems we now face is in trying to recapture that, we don't control the supply chains. China has locked those up. And we're seeing that particularly when it comes to rare earth minerals and the production of magnets. Yeah, you want to do electric vehicles? Great. You're going to need magnets. And who's got that market locked down? China. And so what's our strategy? Let's see how bad we can piss off the Chinese. Brilliant strategy. Just brilliant.
Carl, let me just zoom out a little bit for comparing what has happened so far with the war in Iran. What was the situation before this war started? We had the ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel in 2024, which wasn't a ceasefire. Somehow, Israel was attacking them.
Not a day did Israel honor it. Not a day.
Yeah. And right now we're getting, in my opinion, with this new ceasefire, we're getting to that particular point we had before this war started, before the war between Iran and the United States started, with the case of Lebanon.
Right.
With the case of the Iran, you see what has happened. Before the war started, Iran didn't interfere in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran didn't do anything to do. Iran hasn't, that much influence the Strait of Hormuz. Right now, they're controlling the Strait of Hormuz. As Reuters reported that the Indian oil refineries are paying Iranian oil using Chinese yuan. This is the big change of what has happened as an outcome so far of the war between Iran and the United States. On the other hand, all the bases were destroyed in the Middle East. Most of them, radars were destroyed, not only in GCC countries, but also in Israel as well. Israel is somehow naked as we talk. So Donald Trump is trying to put out something that is a big victory so far for him, which is totally the opposite. It's over. Even with this, the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, we were talking about it. Many people are arguing, in the last, in these 2 weeks of ceasefire, the United States has sent more than 75 U.S. logistic flights to the region, sending assets sending weapons to the region, preparing for something, at least from what we've seen. More than 10,000 soldiers to the region. So the ball is on Trump's court right now. If he starts the war, he's going to get the hit when it comes to the global economy, because Iran reopened the Strait of Hormuz.
Restarts the war.
Yeah, restarts the war. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. This is the situation. It's over for Donald Trump. Isn't that the case?
Good lecture, Nima. Just keep on. Let me tell you something. I think we have, what was it Yamamoto said? I think we have
awakened the sleeping giant
and filled it with a fearful resolve. And this was to be seen ahead of time, well ahead of time. In January the 26th, as I recall, in a synagogue in New York, Temple Emmanuel in Great Neck, I gave a talk they asked me to give, and I entitled it, A New World of Mourning, Chaos or Condominium. We have opted for chaos, and that's our strategy. Our strategy to confront this enormous shift of power from west to east was not to accommodate it, as my president, as ill-served the nation he did, George W. Bush. My president understood China and understood what it was all about in terms, not intellectually, but in economic terms, what it was all about in terms of accommodation or challenge, and decided for the accommodation, which is why he left Cheney and Rumsfeld spinning their tops and wheels and gave that account to Powell. He expressed it to Powell. I understand the importance of Walmart, and he meant that. He meant that without China, Walmart would be nothing. And he understood that that applied across the U.S. economy, and he wanted to do something about it, unlike Trump, who declared MAGA and never had any inclination to recreate an America that was great again, that Larry just well described. He had no intent to do that. He had every intent, I think, or the people around him did, to challenge, not to accommodate this huge shift in power. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're trying to do. And we're going to lose. We're going to lose, and we're going to lose astronomically badly because we are challenging it so ineptly. And we're not even talking about the challenges. They're in the Arctic right now. We're trying to stir up a war with Russia, essentially in the Arctic, because of its allowing China to have access to that long coastline that Russia has. They're going to establish condominium on the new Arctic. We're having it in the Baltic. We're having it at Kaliningrad. We're having it in Ukraine, very visible. And we're having it in the Caucasus. And now we're in Southwest Asia. We're contesting China on all these axes. It's all about China and, to a certain extent, Russia in there with them. And we're doing it badly. We're going to kill ourselves at least a decade or two early. And we're going to kill ourselves rather than accommodating this power shift. You could accommodate it. You could establish a condominium, as I was suggesting, that would be exercised on cooperation, strategic cooperation, economically and otherwise. You could share rare earth metals. You could share lithium, all the things that you need, instead of going to Southern California and trying to rape that lake, that rain-created lake in California, and take all the lithium out of the bottom of it. But we're not doing that. We have decided to oppose dramatically, with inept leadership at the same time, this shift in power. We're going to lose. And Iran is just the most vivid chapter in that right now. And it will resume. And we'll go on to phase 2 and phase 3, and we'll be gone and out of the region. And Iran will be, as Haret said, not defeated and therefore win.
Larry, are we heading toward escalations, or are we heading toward, as they're trying to picture for us, some sort of mutual understanding? You've mentioned that we know that in 2 days, it seems that they're gonna put the sanctions on Russia and Iran again.
Yeah.
And the sanctions are back on Iranian oil and Russian oil. That's what Scott Bessent said. And how about the military operation? Are we going to see some sort of escalation? Because as I've mentioned, they have sent a lot of weapons to the regions in these 2 weeks. Go ahead.
No, we are going to, the plan is to launch a very intense strike, missile bomb strike, JDAMs, TLAMs against Iran. Again, I was in a schizophrenic mood yesterday watching what was taking place, because here was when they announced the ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel, and it's for 10 days. So that takes us to April 26th. And then later in the day confirmed that it applies to Hezbollah. So on the one hand, you got the Trump administration moving to stop the fighting, which is good. We give them full credit for that. But then as we talked about earlier, here's Besant and the Trump administration, one trying to strengthen the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, which is, it's completely ineffective because we don't have enough ships to actually do it. But then on top of that, doubling down the sanctions on Russia, the sanctions on Iran, and sanctions on China, which are those are confrontational moves. That doing that doesn't give you greater leverage over those countries at all. And so then you got to look at is think of it like a car. Are you pressing on the accelerator, or are you pressing on the brakes, or are you putting the car in reverse? And what we're seeing is, with respect to the flow of personnel and supplies to military forces, U.S. military forces in the region, they're pressing the accelerator. Now, that said, there's still some significant problems on the U.S. side. I don't know if you've seen the images circulating. So there are some unhappy Marines on it's either the Boxer or the Tripoli, one of those LHDs or LHAs. They're those like miniature aircraft carriers. They're being given, let's put it this way, food at a high school cafeteria is better than what they're getting, or prison food is better than what they're getting. And it's in limited quantities. So, you got a bunch of hungry, these Marines are 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. You got a bunch of hungry young guys that aren't getting fed properly. They tend to get a bit grumpy. So I fully expect that by next week, we'll be back in a serious hot war with Iran. I hope I'm wrong. But I don't see, unless the Trump administration reverses these sanctions and said, okay, sorry, we weren't thinking clearly, we got to stop this. It's inevitable. We're going to go hot again.
Let me drop a comment in there, Nima, about sanctions. We just had our conference out in Columbus, Ohio, the Eisenhower Media Network, and we had some pretty good people there. One of the things that I think we became apprised of that I was not totally shocked about, but I guess I was shocked to a degree. Since 2000, very analytical study done on this. Since 2000, we have killed 38 million people with our sanctions. That's Mao Zedong and the Cultural Revolution. That's Joseph Stalin and the purges. That's Hitler. Not the whole war, 100 million, but it's Hitler directly. That's what we've done, 38 million deaths. And about 60% of those deaths are children and women. 500,000 in Iraq alone when we had this serious sanctions on Saddam Hussein. The sanctions that when Madeleine Albright was questioned about it said, well, that's all right, we got rid of him. That's a price we had to pay. We got rid of him. 38 million people. We have over 2 billion people under these sanctions. Is there any wonder that Xi Jinping has finally done what he's done and said, we are going to replace the American financial system with the Chinese one? And you all are welcome to join, because we will be emphasizing development, not punishment. Yeah. So that's a serious thing that Scott Bessent just amplified for 2/3 of the world who literally hate our guts for what we do with these things. This is a weapon that we should never have begun to use. It's an international crime, actually. Now, the law is kind of peculiar here. It says if you put a blockade on Cuba for 50 years, Cuba doesn't have the ability to militarily effectively respond to you. So it's not looked at much. But if a country has the military capability to respond to you, then it kicks in. It's an act of war. These sanctions are an act of war. China and Russia have every right to combine their assets and attack us. They won't do that, of course, because they're too smart to do that. They'll take us out otherwise, which they're doing quite adequately. Thank you very much. But that's what Scott Bessent is doing, just like P.D. Hegseth, Secretary of War. Bessent ought to call himself Secretary of Treasury adjunct to the war. That's what we're doing. And this is not going to be tolerated by about 6 billion people who have alternatives now. Did you see where China offered Manila oil? And Manila said, let's talk. Our signatory treaty ally is going to talk to China about getting oil. It's falling apart. It's falling apart.
Yeah. Larry, looking at the Israeli media, they're talking about Gaza was yesterday. Today is Iran and Lebanon, and tomorrow is Turkey. And it seems...
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. I apologize.
Yeah. Here is what Tom Brock said about Turkey.
Where does it go? How does it go? So Israel aligned with Turkey, like Israel aligned with Abu Dhabi, like Saudi Arabia could be aligned with Israel. And for the prosperity of the Israeli people, to me, that's the answer. So I think this rhetoric is going to go away. Turkey is not a country to be messed with.
The guy has some sort of fantasy, in my opinion, when it comes to Israel. Nobody in Israel cares about what Tom Brock is talking about, what the people in the United States are talking about. They have their own agenda, and they're not going to bend, they're not going to get influences from the United States or other places. That's the reality of the policymakers in Israel. Do you see, the Trump administration being capable of forcing them into something?
Well, no, but that last line, what Barack said about not messing, it'd be foolish to mess with Turkey. Yeah,
is that the consequence of the war between Iran?
Yeah, well, we had a technical term for that at the CIA. It was called no shit analysis. Thank you, Captain Obvious. This gives you insight into the Zionist mentality, how divorced from reality they are. But they revealed that what they're really after. They need to destroy Iran, and then next they need to destroy Turkey. And they're not just this is not some idle conversation. I've been taking sort of a backward look at the 1980s. Because, everything, what we're experiencing, what we're dealing with today was really the seeds of all that were sown in the 1980s. And the contradictions in U.S. policy and in Israeli policy at the time. And what I mean by that is from, with the start of Saddam's war against Iran, with our encouragement, and I'm convinced there was a CIA finding back then that authorized this to encourage Saddam to do the attack. And then when Ronald Reagan comes in, we are supplying Iraq with the precursor chemicals to make the chemical weapons. We're supplying him with intelligence on where to use those weapons. We're actually supplying financial aid, among other things. And we do that for 8 years, up through the end of 1988. I mean, Saddam is our proxy. And it's during that time that Israel invades southern Lebanon, and to take out the PLO, that was their target, and they forced the PLO out. And initially, there were some Shia villagers that celebrated the Israelis getting rid of the PLO because the PLO had been, treating the Shia pretty shabbily. But then all of a sudden, the Shia turned, and then 82, you get Hezbollah comes up to start defending, fighting against Israel. And in the midst of this, we get into Iran-Contra. So here is the United States backing Iraq in this war. And then all of a sudden, Ollie North gets into the picture because we want to stop the spread of the Soviets. So we start selling arms to Iran. So we're selling to the Iranians. We're backing the Iraqis. Let them fight. We don't care.
And the Israelis are ripping us off.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's Israel dealing with Iran because they're so fearful of Iraq. So my point in this is there's not some high principle that everybody's abiding by. You're like, oh, we're fighting against terrorism. You know, this war right now against Iran is saddled on the U.S. side with so many false assumptions and lies about the nature of Iran, and we have now picked a fight that we can't win, and the United States is going to lose this conflict, and then the cascading effects of that is everybody, you know, most of the world was looking at us like we were Mike Tyson or Muhammad Ali in their prime, can't be defeated. And now all of a sudden we're getting knocked on our ass. And they're going, whoa, wait a second. I've put my trust in this person, this country, to keep us secure. And the only thing they can do is threaten us. It's the Wizard of Oz moment. You know, that moment at the end of the movie, Wizard of Oz, where the Toto the dog pulls back the curtain, and instead of the great and powerful Oz, there's this little old guy who's an itinerant preacher running the machine behind the curtains, and you realize he's a fraud.
Yeah. Let me just read the breaking news right now from Reuters. It says that the United States has also agreed to release billions of dollars in frozen Iranian funds as part of the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. And this is the other dimension of what has happened so far. Let's see what would happen.
So, again, look at the chaos here. They're releasing funds, but they're imposing sanctions.
Yeah.
I mean, what the hell's going on?
Left hand, do you know what the right hand is doing?
It's so, I think what the GCC countries are somehow in hell right now, Carl. They're just feeling the heat of what's going on. Your understanding of GCC countries, as we were talking about this sort of chaos happening between Iran and the United States.
You asking me?
Yeah,
Carl. I think they've lost all confidence in what was the Gulf Cooperation Council, which I never had much confidence in either, but certainly in the United States. And I think they're going to be really parsed trying to find new partners, trying to determine whom they're going to ally with and what they're going to ally with in the region and external to the region. Don't see them flying off suddenly to Russia or to China, but I do see the influence there increasing greatly. And I see that everywhere. Look at that port in your South America, in Peru, on the Pacific coast. I mean, I keep getting reports about how stunning it is from our own diplomats down there, as well as from people I know in Lima and elsewhere. It's probably the best port ever built in the world, was one of them's words in Spanish. And I don't doubt for a second that South America would rather deal with China, at least with the way China's dealing now, than they would with the United States. And it's probably an order of magnitude rather. So we're losing all over the globe, and we're scrambling around like we don't know what to do about it. And we aren't making America great again.
Yeah.
Larry, isn't that amazing that in the talks, everything we've seen so far, there is no mention of Kuwait. It seems that Kuwait is somehow disappearing from GCC countries.
It's going to be a new addition to Iraq. Iraq will be expanding its territory.
Always wanted to.
Well, and I've got a question for Colonel Wilkerson, because he was there at the time. When you realize that we're fully backing Iraq in this war against Iran up through 1988, and then Saddam goes to April Glaspie and goes, those damn Kuwaitis are stealing our oil, and we're gonna take action against it. And then all of a sudden, the United States goes from having used Iraq as a proxy, supported it, and then all of a sudden we declare it an enemy. I mean, was there anybody in the policy-making position at the time that was saying, "Oh, wait a second, guys, we need to choose a different way here with Iraq"?
That was a pretty intense debate, and one had to give George H.W. Bush his due. 8 years as Ronald Reagan's vice president, and as you probably know, managed all the covert operations and managed the agency in terms of the presidency, and became very dear to the agency. After all, they named Langley after him.
Yeah.
And he was only director for 9 months. So everything that happened with Ronald Reagan, from Iran-Contra to this exchange with Iraq and Iran, and I just take one exception to what you said before. It was omission, I think, not a reality. I think we maintained both sides throughout the conflict. We shifted weight, certainly, but I remember a conversation in the Pentagon that went like this, and this is almost verbatim. We want to keep it to where there's one Arab on one side of the Gulf and a Persian on the other side. Issue them dueling pistols and let them have at it. That's what we want. We want both. We didn't want to disturb the balance of power, but the way we didn't want to disturb it was to destroy both of them. Mm-hmm. And if they did it to one another, that was fine. And so actually, when Vincennes shot down the Airbus and killed all those civilians, and Khomeini said, "Well, I'll accept the UN Security Council resolution. We can negotiate now," I think there were people in the Pentagon disappointed. Because we wanted to destroy both sides so that there wouldn't be a problem in the future. You wouldn't have to balance one with the other and so forth. And we tried to do that for 8 years, and it didn't work. And as you said, by the time we got to the end of that, Iran was about to march into Iraq. And so we had to do something really decisive. And we did Earnest Will, we did Praying Mantis, and sunk a couple of warships, and when we shot down the Airbus, Khomeini himself said that did it. He couldn't. That proved that the United States had taken Iraq's side, and therefore I'll accept the UN Security Council resolution, and we can negotiate an end to this thing. So all to say that it didn't work. I take your points about the 80s, and I put a lot of this on Zig Brzezinski, a hell of a lot of it on him. Mm-hmm. Some of the things that he did and got Carter to do in particular, but I think it started there too. And I think we have now come to the end of some very, 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 very bad foreign policy, of which I have to admit, I'm not actually clear on. I remember Powell coming back and saying, we're going to have sanctions. This is after the premier National Security Council meeting. We're going to have sanctions. He even picked up the phone and called Sam Nunn, and Sam Nunn started a move in the Congress that cost him the presidency, should he have wanted to run, and ultimately diminished his standing in the Congress considerably, to the point on the second reconfirmation hearing of Powell, he actually wanted to hurt Powell in that hearing. Didn't come off, but he actually wanted, because he thought Powell had lied to him. Read Bob Woodward's book, The Commanders. A lot of lies in that too. But Bob doesn't tell lies. He reports what people actually say, and people often lie to him. So lies get in the books. So what you're looking at there is Powell thinking that Scowcroft and Bush and the whole gang had made this decision that sanctions were going to be put on Iraq, but there was not going to be a war. And then all of a sudden, we're in his office, and I think we had Al Gray in there, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, and maybe one other of the service chiefs in there. And all of a sudden, Powell goes, "Turn it up." Hits the remote. And here's Bush saying, "This invasion shall not stand." And Powell looked at everybody and said, "I think I just got different orders." Yeah. Unfortunately, he didn't pick that up and call Nunn and tell him, back off, because it got Nunn in a real conundrum and made Nunn hate him after that. Not hate him, but didn't like him too much. But no one knows exactly why he changed his mind, except Scowcroft was the only one with him. And Brent's initial impression was that if we wanted a new world order, we had to have some kind of dramatic operation that proved, for example, that the UN, once issuing a resolution that called for correction by armed might, would be strengthened in such a way that the New World Order would have an arbiter, and that arbiter would be more or less under the thumb of the United States. That's all. That's the only thing I could figure out. Because Brent, I think, was one of the most strategic-minded and smart-thinking person I've ever met.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that.
Yeah. So but I can't explain exactly why we did it.
But and the other sort of to take this offline a little bit, but the other thing I look back on now with just actual shock is when in 2003, as we're building up to invade Iraq, all over this quote weapons of mass destruction, not a single person who knew could have come forward and said, well, wait a second, these weapons of mass destruction, these chemical weapons we're looking for, we're the goddamn people that gave it to them. We gave it to them. We're the ones that are responsible.
Rumsfeld was the emissary.
Yes. I mean, it's, I didn't understand that back then. I now understand that. And I'm looking back at this is one of the biggest scams pulled on the American people in its history.
Yeah.
History is repeating itself.
Oh,
I used to tell myself when I was in dark moments that Eisenhower pulled off the 53 overthrow of Mossadegh, so George H.W. Bush could get his failed operation too.
Yeah.
That was under the influence of the British, though, who he had become truly in love with, including actually in love with one. And when he was approached, I think he was told the British Exchequer, which was getting from the Iranian oil company about $40 billion a year directly into the Exchequer. And he was convinced that by Churchill and others that if that didn't continue to flow, at least for another decade, Britain was toast. And that's what really did it. Okay, I'll do it. I'll overthrow him. Yeah. Or I'll authorize it. And another person told me, Andy Goodpaster, later when he was in his dotage, but he was still pretty sharp. He said that Eisenhower looked at originally the CIA chief, I think it was Dulles at that time. He looked at him and he said, don't tell me, just do it. That was it. Yeah. Anyway, I got to run. I got another.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Great pleasure as always.
All right. Work on that shirt, dude.
Yeah.
I will.
Okay. See you Monday.
Professor.
Yes,
take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.